Hey guys, welcome to our live show. I am out of the office. I'm actually sitting in a hotel room right now. But we're going to talk about, we have Amy Nixon who's going to be joining us momentarily. She is a housing analyst. She lives down in the Dallas, Texas area, and she actually lives in Frisco. And she's going to tell us what she's been seeing. But I do want to talk about what I'm seeing in the housing market right now. Buyers have been anticipating that we're going to see some amazing discount or reduction in interest rates, mortgage rates. And we're not really seeing that. We did see a little downward movement to get us in the high fives and the low sixes for so far for about a week or so. But we're really not seeing that translate into any revelation of home sales. And what we're going to talk about today is what we expect in the spring housing market as the houses that are selling now are really setting new neighborhood comps and lowering the home prices and sellers that are looking to list in the spring are really not looking forward to that. And I'll give you one example. I had a buyer out last week, and we were looking at a townhouse that was priced at $400,000, and it was a renovation. And one of the biggest things, the problems that we're seeing with a lot of these renovations with flippers right now is they're not doing everything. And what I mean by that is they went into this particular townhouse, which is an end unit. And typically when you see a end unit townhouse, the interior is a little bit bigger than an inner unit in a lot of the communities. But in this particular situation, the dimensions of the inside units of this particular community for a townhouse and the end units are the exact same size. And the flipper went in and bought this townhouse. We looked it up for $240,000, and it is listed at $400,000. In this particular situation, and what I'm seeing a lot of is the flippers are not doing everything. Like I mentioned, they went in and they renovated the kitchen. They put new kitchen cabinets in. They put a luxury vinyl plank flooring throughout the first and second floor, and put new carpet on the luxury vinyl plank was on the main area and the basement, the lower level. But in the third floor, they put new carpeting. They freshly painted everything, put new light fixtures in, some recessed lighting, and renovated the bathrooms. And it was kind of odd because when we were looking at the owner's bathroom, what we used to call the master bath, the owner's bathroom, they had tiled a stand-up shower, but they didn't put a glass door on it. So that's a problem. So anyone buying it that wants to put a glass, door on the shower is going to add probably about $4,400 for that, at least locally in Maryland. So that was kind of odd. I mean, you really wouldn't want to hang a shower curtain in a stand-up shower like this because the water would come out. And then the roof was shot, and the basement in the lower area is where the heating and air system sits, and that was end of life, about 15 years old, and the water heater needed to be replaced. So there was a lot of expense, probably about $40,000 in repairs that could come up for a new buyer in the within the short term. Who knows how long the roof will last when it needs a roof, or how long a heating and air system that's out of date or end of life will last. But interestingly enough, the recent sale that was back in November happens to be the next door unit, and that sold for $340,000. So this seller wants $400,000 for the unit. And so my client, of course, put an offer in. We didn't get the house. And talking with the listing agent, he said, well, I think the sellers believe that the spring market, it's already been on the market almost 90 days. And the seller thinks that things are going to get much better this spring. and said that the highest townhouse that had sold in this community was about 420,000, but the most recent sale was 340,000, same square footage. And this is what's really happening right now, as we see that the houses that are on the market, where the houses are sitting for longer, and this isn't just happening in Maryland, this is all over the country, where we're seeing that sellers that have to sell are setting new sales comparables, and that is driving the comparable sales down, which is going to affect a lot of things. It's going to affect the appraised value when a buyer goes in, especially the buyer that has to have a mortgage, and they go in and the appraiser's looking at the most recent sales. So it really, if you're talking about the same amount of bedrooms, of course, the house has to have a kitchen, has to have bathrooms. So say, basically the same house sold for $60,000 less. And I think what a lot of these flippers are experiencing right now is that, they went in, they bought it, they spent a lot of money fixing the house up. They didn't do necessarily everything. So there's still a lot of additional costs left for a seller. And basically they're just sitting on the market right now. And as I've said before, we've seen a lot of houses over the last quarter of 2025 where the sellers have delisted the property, their house, because they have expectations, many of them, to relist in the spring. Again, thinking that we're going to have this miraculous recovery where, we're going to see a trend pick up in home sales. And I mean, it's just a lot of things are dependent upon that. Number one, people need to make more money. They're just simply priced out. And especially in that first-time buyer category, where in our area, where that buyer's looking for something around the $400,000 range, that's kind of the sweet spot. They're highly affected by the interest rate. They're extremely affected by their risk of income and not having enough money for down payments, and even to cover the closing costs, not even really the down payment, but just to cover the closing costs. And this, we're seeing, is really sidelining buyers and buying this inventory. And they're really going in now. These buyers are looking at the house, which they should. I mean, if you're buying a house, I think people are still stuck in this warp zone that during the 2020 all the way up until really 2023, when we started to see the real slowdown in sales from that 22 era, where they were 2022, where interest rates started to rise. But it was fast, but it really wasn't that. I mean, it was the fastest that we've seen, at least since I've been in business. I think one of the fastest times the Fed has ever raised the rate, or where we've seen mortgage rates jump as fast as they had. It still took most of 2022 to really suppress the home sales. And everybody has been thinking that mortgage rates are going to drop. And of course, we have our president saying that that mortgage rates need to come down. I think really what has to happen is we need home prices to come down, because even if you drop to 5.5%, if we don't see like a 2.75% or 3% mortgage interest rate, these home prices are priced still around that 2 and 3 handle, and even 5.5% is not going to get it done. And then, of course, recently, we've seen where there's a lot of layoffs in the news, and I think a lot of people are concerned that their jobs are at risk. So expectations are really, my expectations are pretty bleak, I believe, for what we'll see in home sales this year, besides the fact that we'll see price declines on the ones that truly need to sell their house. So I think that, of course, we're on a live show. I would love to answer your questions or your comments. So if you chat those in, I'd be more than glad to take that. And I would like to take the opportunity right now to let you know that you can follow us on all of the social media channels. If you're new to Sachs Realty, you can subscribe to our channel, get alerts. We upload about 3 times a week. We do a live show pretty consistently on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern time. You can always watch it afterwards if you don't catch the live. And then we post a real estate Q&A on Thursdays. And then I usually have some type of interview on Saturdays at 10:30 Eastern time on Saturdays, or 7 p.m. Thursday. We post, and then again on Saturday. We do have some very interesting guests that are coming up. I have a very interesting guest this Saturday. She actually worked as assistant secretary to HUD back in the Bush administration, and her name is Catherine Austin Fitz, and she's a bit controversial, but she does talk about it a lot. We kind of, in this interview that's coming up this Saturday, it's going to be released, we're talking about her experience at HUD. So it's very interesting because I always like to ask people, what goes on in their, if they hold some type of position like that, like what really happens, what you do on a daily basis. She dives into that pretty in depth and gives her opinion on where she thinks things are going to happen in the housing market. So you should check that out as well. But let's go and see whether just as I was about to check out some comments and questions, here's Amy. So Amy, what's happening? How are you?
Good. Yeah, you kind of covered a lot of, what I was going to talk about. It's crazy because everything's changing so fast. So this morning I was thinking about what I was going to say, and sorry, I have a crazy cat again today.
Hi, cat.
He's like, every time I do your
what's
podcast,
the cat's name?
Apollo.
Apollo.
My son was watching Rocky when we got him, and so Apollo Creed was part of the inspiration.
There used to be, wasn't it like Apollo and Zeus, like Magnum
yep,
PI?
And then, there's all that. Yeah, there are multiple inspirations behind the name.
Some people don't even know who Magnum PI is, I guess. Well, I have a lot of questions for you, but go ahead and start us off with what you were saying.
Yeah, so I was going to start. This morning I was preparing, and I was going to start by talking about how we actually were starting to see an improvement in our market. As mortgage rates fell into the end of 25, we saw more sales. And that was really positive for our market because it was positive for both buyers and sellers, Todd. And the reason why it was actually positive for sellers is because sellers have sort of been in those 5 stages of grief with the current housing market, and they've been stuck in denial. Like that's where they got stuck in the stages because they had this house and they listed it high and they're like, I don't know why it's not selling, but nobody else is selling either. So maybe it's not selling for some reason that isn't my price too high. Like they could still sort of believe that, and they were able to hold on to that denial. Now we have comps. Now rates were trickling towards 5s at the end of 25, and some people got some courage. Some buyers were like, hey, I'm going to lowball on this house that's, Todd, I'm talking about houses in my region that have been on the market for 6 to 9 months. They listed last spring. They cut the price, probably 10 to 15% over the course of last year. Come December, rates are starting to come down. So buyers are like, hey, I'm going to throw in a lowball offer. Let's see what happens. So they start to get some closed sales. And as soon as the house sells, everything around it on Zillow, the estimate drops. Because this is when you get price discovery, right? When you get enough of a low mortgage rate that people are like, hey, I'll take a bite in this market. That's when you get real price discovery. So as soon as you get that comp, it helps sellers move from denial to acceptance. This is my market now. My neighbor 2 doors down has a similar floor plan to me, and he just sold the house for X amount of money, and it's there, and all the agents have it in their hands. So this is just what I'm going to get now. So then it helps that next seller be like, okay, I either need to cut my price by another 5 to 10% or pull my house off the market if I don't like that, because I, like you said, there's now people that are still thinking it's going to be better this spring. And so it forced sellers to make the next move in the chess game. Like they have now real pieces of reality confirming that prices are lower here in the Dallas region than they were, because now these closed comps are lower than they were a year ago, definitively lower. So I thought that was really positive for the market in terms of like sales volumes and getting some more traction and getting actually more price discovery and more realistic movement from sellers. Then we see the movement on the bond market today, and it's going straight up, and it's not what Trump implied was going to happen. It's not what people thought was going to happen. As the year was ending, we thought we were going to continue to see sliding mortgage rates. Like that was kind of what we expected for spring. So there was a reason to believe the spring market might improve. With the 10-year going the wrong direction, now there's a good chance we're going to see mortgage rates head back towards that 6.5. If that happens, it's going to kill all of this activity again. We're going to be right back where we started last fall, where stuff is just sitting unless we get lower prices. Those mortgage rates staying around 6.5 are going to force more and more lower price discovery and sort of stagnate the market. So it's a little bit frustrating, I think, for people in the housing industry, because we keep expecting to see lower mortgage rates and we're not getting them. And then we're getting sort of teaser policy that implies we might get them soon. So then everybody gets their hopes up, everybody pulls their listing and thinks, okay, soon this is going to be fixed. And then it doesn't happen. And it keeps not happening.
Well, let's back up for just a second. You had said that people 6 or 7 or 9 months ago were listing it high.
Mm-hmm.
They were listing it. I mean, there's 3 reasons why a price is established, or how a price is established. It's either a real estate agent that's pricing it based on comparable sales. It's a seller that is being unrealistic if they're pricing it high, or there's a scarcity in the market that they believe that, hey, look, I don't have to pay attention to recent sales, but because there's no houses available, we're just going to price it high. And all 3 of those reasons, I mean, it doesn't change the fact that the buyers wake up to a reality that they can't afford the payment. You had said something in one of your recent posts that, especially in the Dallas area, that people, their mortgage portion of their payment was actually lower than their taxes and their insurance.
Yeah. That's a reality. That is a problem.
And I think,
and those don't go down. So those never go back down. Those only go up. No matter what, your house can fall in value.
They can go. Yeah.
But the appraiser isn't going to see.
Yeah, we've seen back in the 08 crisis, we actually had a new type of business that broke out, and that was companies that were formed to fight your tax assessment, and you paid them based on what they saved you.
They got you down
in property taxes. However, it's not an easy thing to appeal your taxes. And I know locally in Maryland, we just had our assessments go out, the 3-year phase-in assessment, property value assessment. And I know on one of the properties that I own, it went up 50%. So we're talking about, the difference of, $5,800 to probably close to $8,000 by the time it phases in 3 years. And what that does is that strips away homeowners' equity. So we have a situation where we have this whole cohort of people that overpaid for their homes. I mean, let's face it. We had 10 to 15% price gains in hours when people were overpaying list price and bringing $100,000 checks to make up the gap to buy the house. So we had an instantaneous hike of 10 to 15% in home value. Then it continued from there. That established the comps in the other way, to where, okay, after these houses closed, appraisers were then appraising these higher prices, and we saw this appreciation gain. Well, what happens is when your taxes match that gain, and what that does is when your buyer's payment is driven now by property taxes and insurance, because the replacement value's gone up, so has insurance policy rates. So when you combine those two together, it caps the amount of money they can actually pay for the house. So what it does is it actually strips away any potential equity for that seller to make any money. So they have to fight it. They have to fight whether they win or lose. They have to go with a case and say, you know what, I don't agree with your tax hike assessment. And I know this happens at different times of the year for different states, and the frequency may be different, but you have to, if you're even a buyer, you have to, if you buy that house, you have to look at that and say, wow, they're really, the tax portion is a really preventing me from paying a certain price for the house. You also said, let's talk about how it's good for the sellers. You said that this new reality is good for sellers. So the houses that you've seen in the Dallas area that are starting to sell right now, are these homes that people have owned for a long time, that they have the equity, or are they people that have just purchased in the last 5 years?
It's both.
Are they
There
stuck?
is, yeah, it's a lot of people. The area where I live is a little bit of a dated region. So I'm seeing in like the radius around my house, more kind of established neighborhood. You're seeing older sellers. So this is people who've owned the home since, I don't know, 2015, and they're selling it. Usually, probably it's an older family whose kids have graduated. And for them, they have gained so much equity in that time period that they're okay with taking, a 15% price cut is like, okay, fine. They still are making bank on the property sale. And yeah, I think in my region, just because it's older homes, we're seeing more of like that kind of boomer downsize kind of movement. But in general, in the Dallas area, if you pull up a listing, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to see a listing that was bought between 2020 and 2024. And there's all kinds of reasons why people would sell that quick. Actually, Todd, somebody told me this the other day, and it's another realtor, so I'm taking her word for it, but it sounds like it probably could be true. That in Dallas, moving houses is fairly common compared to other parts of the country, and that the average person who lives here moves like every 3 to 4 years. That's the information that I got from this agent. And I actually can see that because I've seen a lot of people will buy a starter home in a neighborhood, and then they'll either, especially when the market was going up, 3 or 4 years later, they have equity. Their kids are a little bit bigger. They're like, I want another bedroom. I want a home office. So they would sell and they would upgrade their home, because Dallas is kind of like, we have the joke that we're the 30K home of the 30K millionaire. Now it's the 60K millionaire, where everybody wants to keep getting bigger and better. So they want a bigger pickup truck. They want a bigger house with a pool. Everybody's keep like upward mobility in their lifestyle. So we do typically have a lot of people here that would buy a house and sell it 3 or 4 years later for something, upsized. But I think we're also seeing more of that in the last several years too, because you have buyers who were either failed investors. So they bought in 2021, 2022, and they cannot rent out the home. And that's pretty usually easy to tell, because you'll see if you pull up the Zillow listing and you look at the history, it was like listed for rent from 23 to 24, dropped rent price, pulled off market. Now suddenly it's for sale and it looks vacant and it's not kept up inside. That's a failed rental property. And so we're seeing those. We're also seeing people who were remote workers that got called back to the office, who are, maybe they bought in 2021, 22, thinking their job was going to stay remote, and it's not. So they're selling, and you're seeing a lot of that in the exurbs. So those are people who maybe would only own the home for a couple of years. And then another sort of related to that is people who bought in the exurbs, they bought in the last 4 years, they're selling because of traffic. Because traffic has like doubled in a lot of some of the further out regions in Dallas. And my husband and I live a little bit closer to downtown than some of like the really out exurbs. And my husband was commenting even the other day, he's like, my commute has almost added like 40% of time, because there's only a certain number of highways, and we have entire neighborhoods being built north of us that are full of people and cars that all are going to go on the same roads and clog them headed down into the city. So there's also a lot of sellers that are trying to, get rid of a house that has a worse commute than they wanted.
Yeah, well, I see it too. A lot of people are calling employees back to work at least 3 days a week. And for many of these employees, that's a complete disaster. Like you said, and they live too far away from the office. They even live in other states. And I had somebody the other day say, well, like this employer is, breaking my contract essentially because the contract that I signed was to be remote. And, what I said was, I mean, you could quit or they can get rid of you. And the option, yeah. You're going to sue them because they said that I'm sure somewhere in the contract that it could change it upon the employer's discretion. And, right. I think that I've interviewed some very intelligent people on this, and they believe that everyone is going to eventually go back to work, or they're going to become independent contractors. Maybe not everyone, but a large percentage of employees are going to return to work. And I think it's for a lot of reasons. One, I don't think the employers don't feel like they're getting the production from their employees anymore. I think that employees have kind of settled into this sort of, lax kind of attitude about work, and I get it. I mean, I hear people all the time on the flip side of it saying that they work more, that they don't want to spend, it's a waste for them to spend an hour and a half in a car each day. And they want more money to go back to the office because they want to be now compensated for fuel and vehicle expense and the extra hours it takes them to get to and from a job. I mean, I'm hearing both sides of this, and it's and then I hear a lot of people are saying, I love working from home, but I understand it. I don't work as much now that, I probably aren't as productive or bigger yet. Hey, I want the team environment. I'm depressed, never leaving my house. And so, it's all across the board. But I think, for the sake of work, a lot of these people need two incomes to pay for a house. And, look, the alternative is start your own company and try that. If you think that you can be more successful at doing it, maybe you'd work less and make more money. But of course, we know that's not easy, being self-employed.
No. And yeah, the other thing with remote work too is I think all those jobs are going to be like the first ones picked off by AI. If you can do it remotely, then your presence is not required. That is a red flag that it's kind of going to be easy to replace with some kind of technology, or could be. So I really think we're going to move away from remote work in the next 5 years. Unfortunately, it's been really helpful for a lot of families and parents. There's a lot of people who are, like you said, they say they're more productive and they have more time to work and they're wasting less time. So that's a downside to it. But I also, just looking at the grand history of corporate America and the way that companies work and the bottom line and profits and everything, if they can find a way to get more profit out of something, they're going to take it. And if you can do your job at home, then somebody in India or China can do your job from there. So your job can get outsourced, step one. And then step two from that is, well, then your job can just be done by an AI bot, because why not?
Well, it's not just that, it's robotics too. I mean, just what we're seeing as far as advancement of robotics. And, and that's another subject all in itself is, what jobs will be eliminated. I disagree with a lot of the people that think that AI will increase better paying jobs. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that the biggest line item on an employer's financial statement, for the most part, is the employee. And that's because of healthcare costs and, salaries. And we were just talking, I was talking with a friend of mine earlier, and we were talking about utility costs going up. And, he was saying, hey, these utility companies, though you may be mad at them and they make record breaking profits, but I mean, their costs are going up as well. And I think that what we'll see is that instead of having 10 doing a specific job, they'll have one deploying AI. So I've been telling people that you need to embrace it, learn as much about it as possible. If you are using AI in your job, how do you become really great at that so that your employer chooses you, someone that can deploy that technology over somebody that is resisting it or just in fact denial? And I'm not talking about helping the company by, if you're in a marketing role, writing an ad for you or writing a title to something, or coming up with a training manual. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about true value of how does that AI bot or that robot, how does that help a company make more money? Because I think that really, depending on what position or industry you work in, that's really going to be the key. It's not, people think that it's just Chat GPT, or I can go to school and I can write my essay in 3 seconds. No, I'm not talking about that type of use of AI. I'm talking about how does it help? What ideas can you utilize or find that AI can offer your employer to increase productivity, production, sales, lead generation, things like that? Because the person that can deploy it for those purposes, yes, they're going to help advance that. Unfortunately, they will be participating in job elimination, but it's going to happen anyway. Somebody's going to do it. So, I think the question is, what will everyone that's replaced in their role, what will they be doing? I don't think it's going to create all these other jobs that people are just going to say, oh, well, I'll just move from this position to that position.
No.
One of the things that I want to talk about, let's talk about the bond market. Are you, inflation is real. This is real, right? I mean, they say real. that
the numbers are better. I mean, it is the data we're getting. Again, we never know if the data, we had the whole weird thing in October where we didn't get data. But the data that we've gotten recently is showing inflation is coming down. Shelter inflation actually finally dropped, but that was so lagged. I mean, we knew it was coming down because we talked about it on your show for like a year, that rents were soft in a lot of markets, and that on the ground, back in last spring, we saw price cuts happening on homes. So we're like, we see there is some deflation in housing, but none of the data was showing it back then. And that's because it's always so lagged. So there actually has been shelter deflation, or at least disinflation. We still have inflation year over year, but it's come down from the highs. And in terms of just the regular inflation data, Todd, it's hard to interpret it because gas prices have gotten so suppressed. Gas is so cheap right now that it's weighted a certain way in the basket. And then you've got shelter, which was super lagged, finally starting to come down. But then you have other things don't remember if it was, I think it might have been health insurance or car insurance. That went up 40% in one of the last CPIs. So if you're a real human, which is what we are, and we're living our lives and we're writing our budget, we don't always notice those offsetting things. We get a bill from our insurance company and we are like, whoa, you're asking me to pay my deductible or my premium just went up 40%. And it feels like this massive dramatic inflation when you're looking at that item. So then maybe you don't really notice that, your gas was maybe 15 cents a gallon cheaper this month than it was last month because you're focused on that one major bill. And so I think we have right now, the inflation is very unevenly distributed. So the CPI number overall it's showing improvement. If you look at the official data, it's showing that inflation has been coming down. But if you're looking at specific items that impact your life, there are still a lot of things that are going way up in price. Beef is another one. I don't know if you go to the grocery store regularly, ground beef just keeps getting more expensive. And so if you're a regular person, again, you can hear a number and be like, oh, CPI is 2 point whatever. That's not that bad. And the government's going to say, oh, look, it's great. It's not high like it was 2 years ago. It was 3, and now it's 2 point whatever. It's coming down to the goal. But your grocery bill just went up by whatever amount, because even though the eggs got cheaper, the beef just went up $1 a pound.
Well, it's not just that. It's the dollar has fallen, I think, on average 11%, depending on, I think Morgan Stanley put out 11% decline in the value of the dollar. When you're comparing it to other currencies around the globe, they're expecting the dollar to fall another 10% in 2026. So you can start to see that. And if you compare that to any type of disinflation, the disinflation doesn't even look good. When you're not, when your money, your cash doesn't is declining on a global basis, and when we're importing a lot of products, that really doesn't mean anything that we're getting disinflation. Like you said, the inflation rates. I see things that you talked about the grocery store. Yes, I do go grocery shopping, and I see where things that were $5 or $7 in the last year, something that was $8 is now $14 in the last year. So I do see where, the cost of living is going up, despite what kind of crap they're telling you about. It's not going up. It's not, it is going up. And if people aren't driving and they're still working from home, who cares if gas costs 60 cents less a gallon if they're not using and consuming a lot of gas? If somebody's not driving, thousands of miles a month, what does that really mean? It looks great at the pump when you're filling up your gas tank. What do you think is going to happen to home prices? You think we're going to see, just take 2026. You're a housing analyst. What do you think? What do you think we're going to see home prices go up with the unemployment rate rising? You have young people. The unemployment rate's probably in the double digits amongst recent college grads. It takes a year, or graduates from a year ago still haven't found a job, many of them, that is in their line of work or their field of study. So when we're looking at unemployment rates, that's not really what's happening with our younger population. It's much higher, and they're the ones that want to buy a home. And when you're looking at the average age of a repeat buyer being 61 years of age, you're looking at half of them have paid cash for their house, and we're looking at home prices are going up year over year. Things are great. And we know that we're seeing price declines in neighborhoods. You're mentioning 10 or 15%. We have some markets that are down 20% or more from peak to who knows where trough is. You can't even say that. But if you just said peak to 2026, January, today, where do you think home prices are going to continue, especially in the spring market?
So at least in the Sunbelt markets, they're going to continue to come down. And part of that is, like I said, because some of this data is lagged, and we're just getting those comps coming in from December that show, hey, the market's down. Prices are lower. People are going to be listing lower in the spring now because of that in order to sell. And so we're going to continue to see the data reflecting the closed sales is going to show lower prices. In terms of nationwide, it's a little bit trickier because some markets haven't seen declines at all. And I think probably on a national level, we're going to be pretty flat, like in terms of the official Case-Shiller year over year national number. I think that's going to be pretty flat, because there's going to be those regions where you still have like really meager growth, like 1 or 2%. And those are going to all be offset by the regions where we're continuing to see price declines. It's kind of feeling like it's going to be a slow, I don't even know if the word bust is the right word, but it is a bust. It is like a bubble popping very slowly is the way that this has played out. This is not played out in a dramatic fashion like 2008, where it was like, boom, it exploded. it's a painful sort of every year, your home is negative in terms of real value. Nominally, maybe it went up in some areas 1% to 2%, but inflation was 3%. So you're losing your value in real terms. You're paying high taxes on it. You're paying increased insurance prices on it. And it's not a good deal or value proposition. And it's not going to be for several years, because it's going to be this like slow slog where prices, I think for the next couple of years, Todd, prices are going to be pretty flat-ish, meaning a little bit down in some areas, maybe a little bit up in other areas, but no boom. I just don't see any tailwinds that would give us a boom. Like none of the policy that's been suggested that's all supposed to be stimulatory, none of it is enough that I've heard to set off another real estate boom. So instead, what you're going to have is just this crawling market where slowly over the course of several years, real incomes rise, home prices are kind of flat to down, and everything kind of reaches a new equilibrium, which isn't a great market for young people to enter into, especially when your interest rate's going to be 6.5%. A lot of your payment is going to be going to interest up front. Your home is only going to maybe gain a couple percent at most a year. So it's barely keeping up with inflation while you pay high interest on it, while you pay high taxes on it, while you pay high insurance on it. And in the meantime, at least up until this point, every other market has been ripping. Gold, silver, Bitcoin, stock market, tech stocks. All of these have outperformed housing for the last 3 years. So you're starting to get young people that are like questioning the entire system. Like, why would I buy a house when I could rent something just as nice for actually a lower price? In most regions, it's still cheaper to rent. And then I could put the difference, say it's $1,000 a month differential. Like it would cost you $2,000 a month to rent a house. And if you put 10% down and bought it, it would cost you $3,000 a month with the taxes and insurance and all that. You could be living in the rental house, investing that $1,000 in whatever investment vehicle you choose. It's going to compound over time. It's very liquid. And you might come out ahead from the person who just puts all of their money into a house and sees it kind of just move sideways for several years while the maintenance and carrying costs go up.
I'm just kind of curious on values and watching values go up. I mean, they when you take a median price or an average sale price and you're showing some kind of increase year over year, that's reflective of who's buying the houses and their price point. So when you knock out 30% or 33% of the buyers, first-time buyers out of the market, and you knock out another 30% of investors that aren't investing in this market because home prices are high, and you end up with the 33% or so of the buyers being wealthy people, a lot of these repeat buyers that are downsizing or moving domestically from areas like California to Florida, for instance, where it's a bargain for them. They can buy a really expensive Florida home for what they have in cash and selling their California home. How do you come up with a true value to say that home prices will continue to go up 1 or 2% a year? I don't understand when we're looking at, well, let's go.
The reason, yeah, no, that's a good question. I think it's because we're going to continue to see relatively low sales volumes, which is what we've had. We've had really low sales volumes for the last couple of years. But as long as these mortgage rates remain where they are and prices remain where they are, I think it's going to be pretty low sales volumes relative to the historical norms. And so it's going to continue to be sort of what it has been, which is what you said. It's sort of older, wealthier people exchanging homes, and a small percentage of wealthy millennial families upgrading or upsizing, or the wealthy cohort of Gen Z that are buying their first home. And that's going to sort of carry the market for another couple of years. It probably can do so. Where we run into a problem, though, like what you're saying, is probably 5 to 10 years from now, when the boomer generation really starts to pass away. We don't have enough buyers to offset that. So once you start getting closer to 2030, I have a lot of questions about what this market's going to look like, because there's going to be real price discovery when there's suddenly a deluge of inventory. Because Todd, the kids don't keep the house. Everybody says, oh, my kids will, it'll be an inherited property. No, if you have 3 kids, they don't want one house that they're going to all have to like manage as a rental property. Almost in the majority of cases, they sell it. The inheritance means the estate gets broken up, it gets sold, the money gets split amongst the different kids. There's going to be a lot of properties coming to market, and they're going to be coming to market to a young generation that, Todd, right now has the worst unemployment rate, is gambling on crypto and like meme stocks and sports betting, the money that they do have, or YOLOing for vacations because they don't believe in the future of saving. They don't have a lot of hope in the system. These people are not going to enter the system in 5 years. They aren't going to be able to. They're not going to have the means to do so, nor the desire, because they frankly reject the idea of the American dream. They don't think that the way that grandpa got rich is the way they can get rich anymore. They think the way forward is sort of these newer, more prediction market kind of gambling type methods is what they're putting all their money on. So it's going to be a real crisis for the American housing market in the next, probably around 2030. So I'd say in like the next 5 years, it's going to all hit the fan, because you're going to have an older generation who really believed, this is how I get rich. I'm going to go cash out. They're all going to start cashing out at the same time. And who are they going to cash out to? And especially if Trump bans institutional buyers, then really, who are they going to cash out to? And what is that going to mean? That's going to be a lot of price discovery real quick at the same time. And it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, well, I mean, an institutional buyer is not going to buy a house that's overpriced and the rents don't make sense, or that they have some type of rental restriction, rent caps, they can't raise the rent, or that they can't evict somebody, or it takes them 7 to 9 months to evict someone that's not paying the rent. So, and you're right. I mean, I do see that. I don't know that it'd be 5 to 10 years. I know Yahoo had put out, I think coming up on 2 years ago, they had an article that basically was about the silver wave, where 30 million baby boomers would be retiring and downsizing over the next 5 years. We're probably into that pretty good. I think that a lot of that, they're expecting that's going to be end of life services for them, that their equity. I mean, what happens when you go in a nursing home? I mean, yeah, you have people want to, I do see a lot of bashing on the baby boomer generation, but they're not all rich. They may own,
the majority are not.
They're not rich. So, the kids, they don't want the house, but they want the money. They certainly don't want mom and dad's 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 or 8,000 square foot house. They can't afford it. Number one. Number two, they don't need it. Very few people they're not having a lot of kids anymore. And we're seeing people not having kids at all because they can't afford them, because they're working 2 jobs, and healthcare wipes away, any benefit to having their kid in a daycare for the money that they're making. A couple of things I do want to sort of point out, and so I think what I hear you saying is that home prices have to come down. I mean, I think
it's going to take time. It's going to take time, but fundamentally,
well,
we have a real
depends on the seller.
Problem. It does,
depends on the seller, because the sellers that need to sell, if they need to sell and they have to sell their house and drop the price to do it, they're instantly setting new comps in the neighborhood, which makes it impossible for their neighbor to sell unless somebody wants to give them more money than the one sold next door, which is ridiculous to think that way. So I think then what you're saying is it really is going to depend on the cohort of homeowners right now, the baby boomers and Gen Xers. I'm a Gen X. So really, it's going to depend on their decision making and what they do with their home, because we're watching the first time buyer either not entering the space at all, or they're desiring a smaller home, something they can take root in a neighborhood, but they don't need anything more than 1,500 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And that's not the majority of the inventory that we're seeing.
Or
You
they
had mentioned or they just want to rent because they want to move a lot and they don't want to be burdened by that. And people say,
mobility.
well, you know, that, yeah, they want mobility and they don't want to replace a $15,000 heating and air conditioning unit when it goes bad.
No.
I mean, they don't have the money for it. Let's talk about, you said that you thought that wages would go up. And I want to kind of start that by saying, I think we saw one of the largest wage growth periods during the pandemic.
Yes.
Because things were booming, right? We had an influx of money into the system. People were working from home. They weren't spending a lot of time on travel, back and forth to work. So this extra savings went into fixing up their home, or just they spent money, right? I mean, we saw a big boom in money spending. Of course, that went to a lot of the big companies, Wall Street companies, Walmart, Amazon, I mean, for example. But a lot of employers were giving either stay with us bonuses, to prevent them from jumping ship, or sign-on bonuses. And we saw a huge increase in wages to attract people to their booming businesses that they had at that time, where consumer spending went through the roof. How do you see the next wave of increase coming when all of the costs for employers are going up? How do you see how can an employer pay all across the board higher wages without selecting people to keep and deploying technology like AI? So how do you think that the wage growth will happen amongst the few that embrace the technology of AI? Or where do you see where employers are just going to generously increase salaries to meet the growing demand of lifestyle?
Yeah, I probably should have qualified that. Wages go up over time in general, like very modestly.
3% a year,
yeah,
5% a year.
So when I said wages are going to
25%.
continue to go up, I meant just so that normal sluggish, slow climb, which is why I said it's going to take several years. We are not going to see these 10% a year jump in wages like we saw during the COVID boom. That was totally unique to that period of time. That's not going to happen again. And like you said, I do think there will be some selective wage increase where there may be more overall like reduction in workforce. So headcounts might go down a little bit, but the people that do get kept will be paid more because they will be more valuable. They will be doing more work. They will have more skills. So you might see that dichotomy again, sort of like that K-shaped economy, where the people that do have a good job and keep a good job see their wages go up like a little bit more substantially. But a lot of other people in turn either lose their job or become gig workers, get replaced by AI. I think it's going to be, so on aggregate, I think it's going to probably be pretty normal, like relative to history, where wages go up maybe a couple percent a year, basically in line with inflation. I don't think we're going to see these massive wage gains like we saw during COVID. That's not what I meant by that. It's more just
which is, by the way, what supported home sales during that period of time. I mean, that is why. I mean, I always said the only reason, I mean, we expected this thing to collapse in 2022, started to, see where, this wasn't sustainable. Home prices aren't sustainable. Now it's not only that home prices aren't sustainable, property taxes aren't sustainable. Insurance isn't sustainable. Healthcare isn't sustainable. So we're
Yeah.
seeing all of these things explode. Utility costs are not sustainable. So all of these, on aggregate, are even worse than we expected back in 2022, because now here we are 3 years later, where a lot of people didn't even think about this. They're saying, oh yeah, well, home prices can't keep going up like they are. But wait a minute, whoa, what happened to my escrow? And now my mortgage company is telling me I either have to give them $8,000 or my mortgage payment's going up $800 a month, because all of these other costs of insurance and property taxes. So I think that this is now sort of going to maybe accelerate any of these price gains that we need to return to some type of mean. And I think, I just had a podcast with Harry Dent. I don't know. Do you know Harry?
No, I'm not familiar with him.
Yeah. So Harry Dent, he's definitely, has an interesting teaching style, but he's no dummy. He's a very smart guy. And a lot of people commented that he was some wacko. And, we released his video on Saturday, but I tell you what, I mean, the guy's a genius. He's a company turnaround man is what he was, what he specialized, taking major companies that were headed for extinction and, turned them around to where they not only survived, but they got back into the black again with their company. And, he had some very interesting points, but he thought that home prices were going to go back down to about the 2012 level. And, a lot of people are saying home prices will go back to 2019. Some people say they're not going to go back, that, you're smoking birdseed, not going to go back at all. And I think people are just I think if you lay out all of the, if you take account of the stock of what's happening and you look at the numbers and you try and forecast that out, it's very hard to see without having some kind of major debt jubilee or some type of monetary reset, where going along the same trajectory would not make sense for a major price collapse, especially in assets like a house. I mean, who knows? Do I think we're going to go back to 2012 pricing? I mean, that would be pretty catastrophic. Should that be true? I don't really think that that's probable. But we are seeing where in some markets are going back to 2019. I mean, we are seeing certain areas in the Sun Belt and in especially Florida where home price correction is real. So the only thing that would kind of reverse that would be something like a 2% mortgage rate, 2.5% mortgage rate, 150-year mortgage. I don't know.
They're gonna have to pull out something.
I don't see where.
Yeah, they're gonna need a major intervention to get back to that. I don't know. I think I fall somewhere in between. I think we're kind of going to be mean revert. So somewhere in between 2018 prices and where we were in 2023. I think we're going to land there in terms of correction. And the main reason why I say that some of the gains will hold is because we did print like $9 trillion during COVID, and that money did find its way into the stock market.
But it's gone.
Some of it is, but some of it is wealth. I mean, some of it is in stocks, it's in crypto, it's in gold. I mean, people's net worths jumped.
Very small percentage of people that it benefits. I mean, there are very, very small percentage of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you look at what it did to savings accounts, when you look back in 2021, savings accounts were at all-time highs. I don't know that they were ever as high as they were then, but that's gone. I mean, savings for the most part has been depleted because of the cost of living. Yeah, the cost of living. So, well, I know you have to jump off.
I do. Yeah.
Time that so I want to be mindful of that, respectful, and I'm going to hang out here for a little bit and talk about a couple of things, but thank you so much, Amy. I think it's something to watch. We'll have you back as we get into the spring market. I think that caution is the word that I would use if you are considering buying a house, and I'll dive a little deeper into that But I think that, I'm not telling people certainly not to buy a house. I think you can still find deals today when and there are people that can afford it and their jobs are secure. And I think, hey, you know what, if it checks your boxes and you can afford it and you're comfortable with it, then by all means, if you want to buy a house, do it. But I think that over the next couple of months, as we get into the spring market, we'll see it. But I'll let you drop off, and I'm going to take some questions and comments. Amy, always a pleasure.
Thanks, Todd.
Talk to you soon. All right, somewhere here, I'm going to have to get my glasses on. So a lot of what Amy was saying with the, just to kind of recap, why things are so backward looking. And if you understand the real estate industry or you've been listening to my podcast for any period of time, we're always looking at backward looking data in the housing market. And that's one of the reasons why it's so slow to decline. It's very easy to see when things were going up, especially in 2020, 2021, heading into the end of 21, the exact opposite. It was very fast, the price appreciation, because we directly could see that a house that was priced at a certain point was pending within a day. So that's instantly raising the price. Well, if that house right down the street priced it at this and it sold within a day, I want to price it higher than that. So when we're going in reverse or we're seeing price declines, that is a little slower metric because sellers are more sticky to drop their price. They're like, well, what the heck? I mean, days on the market are kind of high anyway. So it's only been on the market for a week or 10 days, yet I haven't had an offer, yet the showings have dropped off after day 3 in a lot of cases. But let's hold on a little bit longer. And then a house goes under pending status or active under contract. There's a difference between those two, and for the most part. But what we don't know is what the buyer actually paid for about 30 or 45 days after it went into pending or active under contract. However, and just to kind of clarify, when a home goes in pending status, so a lot of people say, well, what's the difference? It's active under contract or it's in pending. If a house goes into pending status, that means that the seller doesn't want any more foot traffic. They're saying, you know what, we're confident with the contract that we have, and let's stop the foot traffic. Active under contract means that, yes, we are under contract. However, we still want to show the house. We still want to see what kind of activity is out there. If there is any interest, do we get any backup offers and things like that? So they're the main difference between the two. However, what we are seeing in both of those categories, pending or active under contract, we are seeing where a lot of this, where the seller thought they had it sold, that date was approaching. For whatever reason, they couldn't get past now a home inspection, or the buyer, they couldn't agree to a home inspection. The buyer's asking for things they don't want to fix. And then what happens next is maybe it goes back to active because the financing fell through. And so we are seeing that happen as well, especially amongst the more sensitive buyers like FHA buyers, where their qualifications could diminish, or maybe they really didn't get a pre-approval. They have they did a quick check on things, but as the lender dove further into their financial status, maybe where the money was sourced from, maybe their down payment money or their that they're claiming they have wasn't sourced, or there's money in the bank that they couldn't account for because it hadn't seasoned. So people will write a check for down payment or their escrow, and that money just appeared in the account one day, 2 days before they went under contract, and they can't explain where that went to because maybe their business, maybe they're in some type of cash business or something. But for whatever reason, when it goes back to active, that's never a good thing for the seller, because the next buyer coming along saying, well, why did it fall through? Obviously something may be wrong. But the big thing is that you don't see what that final close price is for 30 to 45 days, best case scenario. when we're talking about what happened during the GFC, and my last interview with Lance Lambert really sort of, even though, even being in the business and having built houses before, renovated houses before, and being a contractor for 35 years, serving the housing market essentially in one way or another for a long period of time, decades, I'm still having revelations to these, what is going on, what has happened, how did we get in the position we're in right now. And Lance had said something in our last podcast where he was talking about the crisis, the GFC, the big housing crash, the biggest housing crash since post World War II, that builders back in that period, to when there weren't a lot of people that could afford homes, decided that they were going to start catering to wealthy people and building big McMansions, these big neighborhoods, and really start serving the people that are less affected in downturns or typical downturns. And a lot of people that were devastated, there were a lot of people devastated in the GFC, and there were a lot of people that capitalized because they had a lot of money and they could take advantage of asset prices collapsing, and it benefited them. So the big builders started catering to these, where do you drill where the money is, right? Kind of mentality. The problem is now, even that upper middle class is now, we didn't have the super high cost of living like we have now. So even they're being affected. So even these big box houses that they're building, we're starting to see that weaken significantly. And doing rate buy downs hasn't helped them. Doing 3.99% rates or 4.99% rates or 5.5% interest rates, that's really caused them to do other things, like starting to build smaller houses again, reducing the footprint of the build, and then also doing other price concessions, price cuts. And these are some of the things that we've experienced because the builders have to push and move the inventory. And we've seen where new home prices have dropped below existing home prices. And this is kind of like, well, why would I buy an existing home when I can buy a new house? And the builder has a mortgage company, and they're going to lock in my 30-year fixed rate mortgage at 4.99%. And if things get crazy and drop to 2.5%, there's no prepayment penalty, and I'll just refinance it. But I'm going to go for this new build now, if you have those happening in your area, versus the existing home where you need to work on everything now, or you may not like what you're buying. It may have some functional obsolescence, and I'm going to need to spend more money to fix up that older home. So what I think is that the existing home inventory, we're going to see super price pressure, pushing that down, I believe. I mean, certainly, a lot of people disagree with me, but we're seeing where homes are sitting on the market. We're not seeing the absorption. We don't have a shortage of buyers. We have a shortage of buyers that can afford to buy at the current prices. So that is, we're going to get into a situation where these 30 million baby boomers that want to downsize, that they will be, if they want to sell. And the other thing, let me just say, a lot of baby boomers, most of them actually, from my experience in going in houses and meeting with them, is that they haven't fixed anything major. I mean, they'll keep the house operational, but they haven't done many renovations because they're looking at conserving their money. As they're an older person, they start to get into their 70s or 80 years old. They're saying, well, I don't want to spend money on a kitchen renovation or a bathroom renovation. I don't want to spend $20,000 or $30,000 to sell my house. It's been fine for us and everything works. But that buyer that's coming through, especially there's first-time buyers, they're like, this doesn't work for me. And so we're seeing the big disconnect with that. And I can only imagine, by adding millions of more, looking into, if we have 30 million baby boomers over the next several years, or even half of those that want to sell. And then you have the people that are obviously going to pass away, and it's going to fall into an estate where their children are going to sell the house. And Amy was saying something, like the kids don't want the house, they want the money. And that's my experience as well. And when you look at, let's just take a family of maybe they have 3 or 4 kids. a lot of these kids, they don't all live in the same state. And they're no longer attached to the house. Yeah, they grew up in the home. But when you look at something like that, if they drop the price, let's say a $500,000 house, and they drop the price 10% or 50 grand or $70,000, when you divide it up between 4 kids, if there's no mortgage on the house, it's not that big of a increase in their pocket. They want the money. So when these houses start sitting on the market like that, the children want the money and are the ones that are typically the ones that are saying, you know what, let's just sell it for the price. And as the whole theme of this we've went in a lot of different directions, but the theme of the video is new comps are being set. And that is what, it's really hard to sell your house for $50,000 or $60,000 more than the next door neighbor if it's a house that is completely livable. Right? It has a kitchen. Well, so did the house next door. So maybe it has new cabinets and a countertop, and that may get you a couple more dollars, but it's not. I mean, you can't say, well, the roof is newer. Well, I'm sorry, but if it doesn't leak, it's, if it's not shot, having a roof that's 10 years newer doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make $50,000 or $60,000 more on a house either. So there's certain things that when we're looking at comparable sales, and homes that have sold in subdivisions for less money than a seller wants, it's very shocking to them that the seller let it go for that. But it becomes not the outlier, but becomes a comparable sales and starts to reset new prices. Could go up or down. In this case, we're seeing price declines and where these new comps are being set at lower prices. So, let's go ahead and take some comments and questions here. All right, here we go. Let's see if I can see this. My question is, why are people paying these prices? Just don't buy. Stephanie, I don't know if you're still on here. I knew we were limited with time with Amy, so I didn't want to take a lot of comments and questions then with her on here. But we're seeing that people aren't paying the prices. I'm seeing people flat out refuse. I have buyers right now that are putting in offers on houses. And maybe I have, a dozen or so active buyers that want to buy in the next 12 months. But they're completely fine with signing renewals on their leases as well. Many of them, some of them are saying, hey, I'd like to buy something by May, but we'll see what happens. It's when my lease is up. And if I can't find it, what I'm looking for, I'll just sign a renewal. And a lot of the leases now, maybe you have 2 payment penalty to buy out your lease. So a lot of people are just have that in the back of their mind. They're like, well, if I get a really good deal on a house, I'm going to put that into consideration of the price that I offer. If I have to buy out a year, I'm only 10 months in to my new renewal and I have to buy it out. If I buy a house, they're keeping that in their consideration for offering, in their price offer. But we're really seeing, we do have agents that will counter what I'm saying, and people that are having banner years or had the best year that they've had ever in 2025. You have to understand that if an agent's been around and they've been a very successful agent, most of their work comes from referrals. So you sell a house, you're in the business for 10, 15, 20 years. And a lot of times you get to the point where now you're selling that house that you sold 15 years ago or 7 years ago, even, or even 3 years ago. There's a lot of buyers that made mistakes. So you do see real estate agents that are saying, and they probably are true, that they had a banner year in 2025. But that's not the norm. It's a massive amount of agents that haven't sold one house or that have sold 2 or 3 houses in the last 12 months. And when you're looking at 1.5 million real estate agents across the country, my guess is somewhere, I've heard reports where they say 71% or so in 2025 didn't sell but one house or less. You may have the associations that disagree with that. But I think that it's probably more true than not that the majority of agents aren't selling houses. So sales are down. We also looked at last year, we had about 4 million active transactions, existing home transactions. And we've seen recent years where that number's been much higher than that. 4.8 million to 6 million in transactions. So the transactions are down, but that has nothing to do with why or the motivation behind somebody selling. And that the fact is they couldn't sell it for the price that they could have sold it in 2021 or 2022. So that kind of goes directly against people that say the home prices will never come down, because we are seeing where sold prices in the neighborhood have come down. And, I believe, and I'm not trying to be a doomer, it's just a fact. I think we have a lot of price appreciation. We have a lot of movement, a lot of equity that can be absorbed, and where the seller could still make plenty of money, but it's not going to be what they could have sold for in a boom period. And I don't think we're going to see another boom period for, I don't know how long, but I certainly think that we'll be in, at the very least, some of this in more of a stagflation for a long period of time, maybe even a decade, before we start to see where this equilibrium comes back into balance, which is really it's kind of interesting when you look at the housing market having such a big portion of GDP. I mean, depending on, economists say certainly at least 25%. Some economists will say up to 35% of GDP is from housing or housing related services and expenses. When you're looking at labor and stores like Home Depot, Lowe's, for instance, I mean, a lot of people, if they're not spending money on their houses, that is going to have a big impact as well. And certain areas, I mean, you go to certain cities like Nashville, Tennessee, even though they're seeing price declines, they're still booming. There's a lot of bulldozers in farms that have been sold, and a lot of new developments that are going up. I think that they are going to find that their sales are going to be very weak, because I think even amongst the mad rush of companies relocating their headquarters and bringing people, I think the next mad rush will be, how do we turn these companies in the black? How do we make them profitable? And how many people do we need doing that? So a lot of people are relocating states and finding out that their job didn't work out, and they bought a house in a new state, and now it's a disaster for some people. So I think caution is the word that I would say. If you want to buy a house today, just be very cautious as to your what you can afford. I have a great home buyer course, Todd Simple home buying course. I'm only licensed in Maryland. If you're in Maryland, I can certainly help you. But the best way that I can help a home buyer across the country is for you to get my course. It's $300. I mean, it will potentially save you thousands of dollars. And just on the avoidance of costly mistakes alone, in understanding the process I walk you through over really 14 chapters of, the home buying process, really is going to help you to realize, one, how much home can I afford or should I afford, and what are my must-haves, and how do I come to that conclusion? How do I pick areas? How do I know what houses are best suited? What should I be looking for when I walk into a house that has functional obsolescence? I cover these things in depth. I have worksheets. I have resource guides for people, and for anyone wanting to buy it. It's not just for first-time buyers. A lot of people say, and then a lot of people say, hey, I know what I'm doing. I've bought 3 houses in my lifetime. That's nothing. You go up against a real estate agent that sold 50 or 60 houses in a year. Yeah, your 3 houses in a lifetime, and the last house that you bought was 10 years ago. Things have changed. There are new rulings on compensation that have changed. There's new strategies on navigating the process, inspections, negotiations. So there's a lot that goes into what real estate agents do. And people want to say, well, a real estate agent doesn't really do a whole lot. That's really not true. A real estate agent does a whole lot. The right real estate agent. There are agents that probably don't do as much, or, you may question who they represent. They represent themselves, or they represent their client. But that's not everyone. I mean, it is if anything else, even if you don't want to represent yourself, if anything else, taking this course of mine is going, it sounds like an infomercial, but I can't stress it enough that it's going to give you the education to even know how to interview an agent, to know whether that agent is going to be supporting you throughout the transaction. And I just see so many mistakes in this business, and so much buyer remorse, especially over the last 5 years, because things cost so much money, guys. I mean, it's different. If you bought a house where it was 3x your income or 2x your income, I mean, that it was a different time in many of the baby boomers' lives, right? I mean, we're talking about housing. You could afford a home and raise a family on one salary. So now that we've seen where, especially in some markets that are now 6x or 7x or higher based on median income to median home price, when you're looking at something like that, you really need to be educated. I mean, would you go out and just get a stock account and just throw stock money in the stocks, having zero idea of how it even works? No, you wouldn't do that. Or if you're doing that, you probably haven't been that successful, unless you bought Bitcoin when it was, less than $1 a coin. And you did that in a fluke, but you would have probably already sold that at least 100,000 times between then and now. But anyway, so there are people that are just frozen. And a lot of why they're frozen is because they have no idea of what they're doing. And so that's why having the education is important, because it's going to give you a path that you at least now have some kind of an idea of what you're doing. Then you can decide if it's right or not. You may think that, hey, I can afford it now, but maybe now is not the best time because of these things that I haven't thought about before. So anyway, let's take a couple more comments and questions. What incentive is there for someone with a 3% mortgage rate to sell? That takes 33% of home inventory out of the equation. Supply just not there to drive prices down. This has been a lock-in effect. So, one of the, for those that were able to refinance their higher mortgage rates, or whether they bought a home when mortgage rates are 2.75% for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, that really plays into whether they want to move or not. But there are a lot of people that they don't have a choice. So I always say that interest rates are like this. It's like a house payment. You can either afford it or you can't. So what we're seeing now is that a lot of people have not paid their mortgage. And, we had mortgage moratorium. We had mortgage modification, where a lot of people haven't paid mortgage payments in years. Several years they haven't made a mortgage payment. In October 1, that changed when it's called the waterfall, or that modification process changed drastically. October 1 of 2025, after your next freebie, because those that had not had a mortgage modification prior to October 1, when they set that the new rules for mortgage modification, they allow you to do it one more time, which means this: up to 30% of your mortgage balance could be essentially placed on the back end of your mortgage in a junior mortgage or junior note. So what was happening is people weren't making their mortgage payments for 4 and 5 months. And as long as they communicated with their servicer, as long as they didn't move out or vacate the house, as long as their payments that they're resetting back to, like, you're never late. Now, next month you start making your payment. They took the payments that were in arrears. It was 5 or 6 months. Let's just say it was $8,000 or $10,000. They caught them up. Make your payment next month, but we're going to take this past due amount. We're going to take it out of the mortgage. We're going to put it in a 0% interest second or junior mortgage, and we're going to put at the end of your term. So if you have 27 more years, then that money that we just took out, that past due money that we modified your mortgage for, started you back to your current, and next month make your payments again, will only be due after you pay off your house, refinance, or sell. So it doesn't go away, but it doesn't make you late anymore. Well, there was no rule on how often or frequent that could be done if you had an FHA mortgage. So now they say that if you fall late in your payments after your freebie, your next freebie, you can only ask for a mortgage modification once every 2 years, and that you have to make 90 days of payments in order to have that modification. And like I said, as long as that all those payments that keep getting pushed to the back of the loan, as long as it didn't go past 30% of your balance, your mortgage balance, they were just remodifying this. So a lot of people, despite and by the way, if they had a cheap mortgage rate, when you do a mortgage modification, loan modification, your remaining balance that you're being mortgaged on, or your payments are being based on, is adjust to current rates. So a lot of people gave up probably very low interest rates because of that, because they needed a modification. The other thing is, if people have to move, doesn't matter what their mortgage rate is, or if they have an economic downturn personally, it doesn't matter whether they have those cheap mortgage rates. But yes, for the people that had the cheap mortgages, or still do, those 3% mortgage rates, there's no incentive for them to sell if they don't need to. It would be stupid for them to sell, because their home prices have gone up from when they bought. And if you have a 3% mortgage, or you refinance to that level, that was pre-2022. So chances are the home prices are more, or, because a lot of people bought before 2019, took advantage of those 3% refinance rates. So they would be looking at buying a more expensive house and getting less house for it. So there's really no incentive. And their property taxes are still low compared to what they would be reset to if they sold their house and bought something else. So that is a big problem. And so the question is, where do mortgage rates have to be for this cohort in order to encourage them to move? Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be mortgage rates. So some people say 5%, that if we got to 5% for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage on average, that would be an incentive for people to give up those 3% mortgage rates. It's not just that. It's everything else, that it's the cost of insurance that's going up. And it's also the cost of utilities for the house. If they have too big of a house for their kids have moved out of the house and their life has changed. Well, I mean, then it can be something where the monthly cost, or they're trying to reduce the overall monthly cost, or maybe it's repairs that they want to avoid, or updates to their house that they want to avoid. So they would sell and still have equity to sell it as is and move on, because they look at it and they go, okay, well, if let's spend $50,000 on my house, but I'm going to buy something that's more expensive, how long does it take to absorb that $50,000? And they still have it in their mind that if interest rates drop, they can refinance later. So, I mean, it really truly is kind of a mess that we're in right now. This, just reading the first couple of words of this, gave me a point that I want to make regarding square foot price. If you find a house at $159 a square foot and only 3 times your yearly income, would you call that a good deal? It's in a suburb of Raleigh, or however you say it. I've been corrected on that numerous times. I'm from Baltimore, so it is what it is. But anyway, I get this question so often. People are honed in on square foot price. So the first thing I'm going to tell you with this you can't take the listing price of a house and divide it by the square footage of the home. You have to take out the land, and people do this all. They don't think about this. So the most simplistic way of doing that is to look at a tax record. So the tax record is going to show a land value, and it's going to show an improvement value. Improvements are the house. So when you're looking at land and then you look at improvements. So first thing you have to do is you have to take out, at the very least from the tax record, what is the land value off of that home? Because if you're a small house on 5 acres, the land's going to be a lot more valuable than if you're on 7,000 square foot lot. So you also then at that point may look at what land is available for sale in active inventory, but you have to take out that land price and then divide the square footage into that new price that once you've taken that land price out of the listing price. The other thing is you have to look at the condition. So for the most part, a house is a depreciating asset. The home falls apart. Land prices go up, home prices deteriorate. And people say that's not true. Well, it is true. Just don't fix your home and let it rain inside and see how much your house is worth in a year or two. You have to spend money fixing that house and keeping it up. And there's a certain cost of home ownership that you just have to plan anyway, right? But you have to look at the condition of the home. You have to look at the main components. You can't really include an outdated, I just sold a house last week. We closed on it. And the home had blue tile in one of the bathrooms, and blue tub, blue tile, blue countertop, blue, and you look at that and you say, okay, well, that has some functional obsolescence maybe, because in today's world, a lot of buyers may not like blue, though a lot of that's coming back, pink and blue and green back in the 70s colors and into the 80s. But if it's in perfect condition, which this was, I mean, it's completely functional. So, it really isn't functional obsolescence, though some agents will say that it is, but it's not, because it works perfectly fine. And the diverter's in good shape. Everything works. You turn the knobs, water, faucets, and everything works as it should. Well, if you start going around the house and you say, yeah, it's dated, well, then then the square foot price still is a pretty solid metric. But you have to look at, if you have to go in and do a lot of renovations, if you have to make major repairs, your heating and air systems end of life, 12 to 15 years, really they consider a HVAC system, your heating and air system, end of life, which means that it could last another 15 years, but it may not be completely the best efficiency as far as cost savings. And because this equipment has become higher efficiency, where they save you more money to heat and cool. But if you're looking at a house that you have to go in and you have to do a lot of replacements in potentially the next year or two, then that weighs into the square foot price. Isn't really a good metric. And what brings me to this point, and 3 times your yearly income, I always say don't finance more than 3 times your annual income. So what I mean by that is, if you make $100,000 a year in total household income, you should not be financing, in my opinion, more than $300,000 for 30-year fixed rate mortgage. You may be told that you can spend another $150,000 more than that by a lender, because your debt to income ratio is low, because your car is paid off and you don't have credit card debt. But that's called life. You're eventually going to want to buy another car, and that's going to change that. So the lender's qualifying you for the maximum amount now based on your fact that you don't have a whole lot of debt, but life will increase your cost over time. So I always say that, and people say, well, what if I have $100,000 to put down? Okay, well, let's look at it this way. Should I buy a $400,000 house if I make $100,000 a year and I have $100,000 of income or savings to put down, and I'm only going to finance $300,000? Well, then you should make an adjustment for the difference of the tax assessment of a $300,000 house or a $400,000 house. And then you decide on what that difference and how that, and your insurance costs, how that affects you. If you're comfortable with that, then maybe you move forward. But I don't, hey, I just got this inheritance. I'm going to buy, I only make $100,000 a year, but I'm going to buy an $800,000 house because I have 500,000 I just inherited, and I'm going to buy it down to where I only have a $300,000 mortgage. That's not smart, because you're buying an $800,000 house where all the components, when they break, is going to be 3 and 4 times the cost that it will be for that $300,000 house. So, if you have extra money, I say buy within your income means, not your cash in hand means, unless you're, a baby boomer or what, you're smart to life and expenses and things that can come up. But if you're a first time buyer, buy within your income means is my recommendation, and take that additional money and invest it. And, maybe you do buy, give it to a financial advisor and have that money make money for you, because that's not going to change your world. That $500,000 investment, if you're 35 years old, or $500,000 inheritance, if you're 35 years old, is not going to change your life. It's not going to retire you. So go with what you make and that you're comfortable making. And if you feel like a spouse could lose their job, or you have decided in a couple of years you're going to have children, and you want your spouse to stay home and raise the kids, then you need to really look at that single income. Hey, we need to buy 3x that single income. And that's going to adjust what you buy. But, looking at a house that has outdated features, as long as it works, then live with it. You don't necessarily need the world starting off. If you can get a good deal in that house, because, 95% of the buyers walk out the door because it has blue tile in the bathroom, or the kitchen has Formica instead of granite, but everything works just fine. Look for those diamonds in the rough that most people don't want because it doesn't excite them. It's not what they grew up with. And start with that and grow from there, and change and make sweat equity improvements that will be an investment. Take some of that $500,000, if that was you that had an inheritance, and fix up the house a little bit at a time. Don't go in all gangbusters, but so put those kinds of plans together. What I want to say here is that a lot of people have come on in my comments, and by the way, in our real estate Q&A that I do on Thursdays, I pick a lot of the comments and questions from our recent videos, but I look back in other videos as well. And so if you have a comment or question, chat it in. You may be in next week's real estate Q&A. But you can also send me an email. I get a lot of emails. I just say be patient, because I get probably, I don't know, hundreds of emails a day. It's ridiculous. It's a lot to keep up with. I won't say it's ridiculous. I'm grateful, but it takes me some time to get back to you. And I will try and point you in the right direction. I do encourage that you get my course if you're looking to buy, but I still will try my best to answer questions. But a lot of people will comment and they'll say, when it talks about home prices coming down, and this is kind of like the biggest, I want to just say it's ignorance, but the true sense of ignorance and just not knowing, right? I mean, what does someone being ignorant mean by dictionary definition? It's not knowing, not understanding, or not knowing. And a lot of people say, you're wrong. Home prices are never going to drop, because if the square foot cost to build keeps going up, home prices will never come down beneath that square foot price. It's just not true. It's something that's just not true. You can buy existing homes for less than you can build a new home for in a lot of cases, when there is some type of work necessary or needed, or that an area changes. I mean, tell that to the city of Detroit, that home prices would never come down. I mean, I went to Detroit. I drove around Detroit. I mean, beautiful houses that were completely abandoned, and that you could probably buy for thousands, literally, maybe even less. I mean, that you could say, well, that home really, the value will never come down because the auto industry completely pulled out of downtown Detroit, and so did all the jobs that left that area. Or you have major corporations laying off, like we see today, 5,000 employees in a location or two locations, and we're seeing 2,500 or 3,000 jobs lost in a metro area. And some of these people have houses and have to sell. You absolutely, hardship can create home prices to drop below values of replacement costs of, well, you can't build that house for that price today. Well, guess what? It may even be a better built house. So that is true. But what you're looking at is, what was the cost to build then? How long have the sellers been in the house? And they could still have equity selling it for less than today's cost to build. So that seller may be willing to take less square foot price, a cheaper per square foot price on their house, because when they bought it, the square foot price was a third of what it is today, right? So everything comes into play. This is not just a one brush stroke cures everything or fits everyone. Or that's why real estate's local. That's why you need a knowledgeable agent if you're going to have an agent, or you need to be educated on the entire process, because it's a big deal. You're talking about something that is going to significantly impact your life, hopefully for the better. But it can impact your life for the worst, at least short term. And it has. So what we like to do is, and the whole reason why I like this podcast platform, is to be able to educate people, not tell them not to buy. I say to people all the time, wait another 3 months, or wait another 6 months, or wait till next year. I do that. I can be sometimes not a very good salesperson. And I even tell that to my clients sometimes, like, I'm telling you, I wouldn't make this move right now, but take it for what it's worth. But I mean, I'm just trying to give advice and educate people on what a lot of people won't take the time to do. But anyway, let's see if we have any more comments or questions that Riley pulls up here. All right. Why are people posting houses that have debris and junk everywhere, also expecting $2 and ever is old and nothing has been updated? I mean, this is what we're seeing. I mean, this is, yeah, I hear you. One of the things that I teach in my course is to be aware of, what you see in your neighbor's yard, for instance. I mean, if you have, a lot of people won't do that, or they go look at a house at night, they put it under contract, they go back the next week with a home inspector. Maybe they take off work to do a home inspection, or they go back at night to do a home inspection, and they don't realize that the next door neighbor has 6 untagged automobiles in the backyard, and from your deck you can see it clear as day. Or that they have 7 barking dogs that they never put in at nighttime. They come home or they leave them out all day, all weekend long. And so there's a lot of what we see, frustrated buyers after they buy. They're like, man, I had no idea my neighbor was so obnoxious. And and I mean, that can be in the most expensive neighborhoods too. It's not just that you're going to see that in inexpensive neighborhoods. So you have to be aware of what you're buying. And though that doesn't mean your neighbor won't change and you won't get some other crazy neighbor, but at least now you need to look around. You see a lot of junk. I had buyers out a couple of probably 2 months ago, and we were looking at a property, and we had seen where the neighbor directly in the front, their yard was a disaster. And my buyer said, well, I have to have a conversation with the neighbor. This buyer listens. He's still actively looking and probably will listen to this show. But he said, I'm going to talk to these. If I bought this, I'd have to talk to the neighbor and ask him to clean up the yard. Not going to happen. They're not going to change their life because you bought a house. So these are the things that you have to pay attention to. Another thing is people don't realize the traffic on the street. Maybe it's a through street, and they're looking at the house at 10 o'clock Saturday morning, and they don't see the house at 8 o'clock in the morning or from 5 to 7 in the evening. And it's the main thoroughfare for people going to or from work. And it's noisy and busy. And so you have to look at houses at different times of the day too, when you're sort of scouting out, your area where you want to live and a specific home. So, but yeah, I mean, I hear you. These houses they're out there. They're sitting on the market for extended periods of time, and we're seeing where the only way to move this inventory is to drop the price in a lot of cases. So, all right, guys. Well, don't see where Riley's pulling anything else up here.
Yep, that's all I got.
That's all you got. We got a lot of comments, but no questions that you have flagged here. Okay. All right, guys. Well, look, I really appreciate you spending your time with me. I hope you got some value out of today's show. And if you did, you can hit that thumbs up. It's sometimes the only way that I know. I see how many likes that we get in relation to views. So if you did like the video, hit that thumbs up button for me. It also helps the algorithm push it out. And I love your comments and questions. Keep them coming. And if there's a special guest that you'd like to have for me to have on the show, let me know in the comments, and we'll do our best to get them on there, especially topics and things that you want to hear. I do this for you. So we'll see you next time.
Sachs Realty, Maryland broker number 607720, office number 443-318-4514, equal housing opportunity.